Hello and welcome everybody to Game Changers Golf Equipment. Today, we're traveling all the way back to the 1800s with this lovely Forgan Bulger driver, one of my favorite topics when it comes to game-changing, innovative golf equipment. It's these transitional eras, transitioning from a concave face to a Bulger face is an interesting transition in my mind. So look at this lovely driver. There's a lovely sole insert here with 3 hickory pegs, nails. And it's just so cool to see this technology come out in the 1800s, and we still use this idea today. So let's dive into the history and the transitional era of the 1890s. Several things have to happen for an innovation to really capture the heart of golf. All of what we're going to talk about today happened in Scotland. And in order to have this discussion, would like to go back to 1786, the year Hugh Philp was born. Hugh Philp opened a carpentry and house painting business in St. Andrews near his birth town of Cameron Bridge. In 1812, he started making golf clubs on the side. His clubs today are recognized as some of the most well-designed and well-crafted handmade golf clubs ever made. Naturally, it didn't take long before the demand carried his golf club repair and manufacturing work to a full-time shop located right next to St. Andrews Links. He established an artistic level of refinement to the look of his clubs. For today's discussion, we'd like to note that the faces of his woods were concave. This set the standard for decades and decades to come. The golf driver, as they knew it, had a concave face. By 1852, Hugh Philp was chronically ill and turned to his nephew Robert Forgan to run the shop. Soon after, in 1856, we lost the greatest club maker of all time. A few short years later, in 1860, 8 professional golfers assembled for the first ever professional tournament at the Tom Morris-designed Prestwick Club. Willie Park Sr. won the tournament. This tournament became known as the Open Championship and was held annually at the Prestwick Club until that changed in 1873. With the introduction of the Open Championship, it really moved golf from a competitive sport to an even more competitive sport. Every player wanted the best equipment to win tournaments, and this led many amateurs and professionals to conduct an even more rigorous audit of every single club in their bag, always looking for the slightest improvement or advantage. And it was an amateur, Henry Lamb, who is credited with the transition in golf that we're talking about today. He was born in 1844, not in Scotland, not in England, not in the British Isles. He was born several thousand miles east in India. His father worked for the East India Company, and we don't know much about his early life, but golf did weave its way more and more into his life through his 20s. At age 29, he is recorded as placing 8th at the first Open Championship held at the old course at St. Andrews. This handed him the honors of low amateur and the only Englishman in the top 10 finishers. In 1888, after many tournaments, he observed something about his equipment. If a right-handed golfer hit the ball out of the toe with the concave faces of the era, that the ball would indeed start left, but then it would hook further left because of the rotation and gear effect of the club interacting with the ball. Similarly, if hit out of the heel, the ball would start right and then continue to fade further right. And with that understanding, he decided to bulge the face. So that way, the ball would actually start right off of the toe and then move to the left. And similarly, if hit out of the heel, it would start left, and the gear effect would bring it back to the right. And that brings us back to Robert Forgan, who in 1860 started his own shop in St. Andrews, and in 1863 made a set of clubs for the Prince of Wales and was given a royal warrant. Our Forgan was well established, and because of the demand of both professional and amateur golfers, manufactured what his clientele demanded. And in 1890, that was the Bulger driver. And that brings us to this club, the 1890's R. Forgan Bulger driver. Let's have a closer look. We're going to start by looking at the crown, R. Forgan. That tells us something. The Bulger idea was introduced in 1888, and R. Forgan passed in 1900. So we know this club was made between those two dates, pre-1900. Additionally, you see the feather stamp right here of the Prince of Wales. R. Forgan had a royal warrant from the Prince of Wales, but in 1901, the Prince of Wales became the king, and so this would be replaced with a crown. So again, another indication of the era that this was made. I just love soaking this in. You can actually see the bulging face right here, which in era would be pretty unique. Additionally, something that I love is the shaft seems to be the same thickness as the neck here until you turn it sideways and you see there is more material here they used to splice these together. And the more I look at this, the more I'm fascinated with how all of this works. Let me show you some of the things that just really fascinate me. So here on the face, this bulging face, it seems as I turn it and I show you the toe profile, watch for the curvature of this face. It's almost like a twist, which I think is really interesting. And there seems to be a face insert right here. Looking at it, I can't tell, but it looks like leather. And it looks like there are some pegs or nails holding the leather onto the face. Absolutely just phenomenal that there's a face insert here pre-1900. And I just love looking at the wood grain here and the texture. It just looks so interesting. And the other thing that's super interesting is here at the leading edge of the sole. This, to me, it looks like some sort of keratin, right? It's like the same stuff that you'd find on a horse hoof or a sheep, like a ram's horn. You'd find something like this. That's what it looks like. It's slightly translucent. It's really hard to capture that on video or camera. And then there seems to be 3 hickory pegs holding this in place. This, to me, just look at that. A leading edge insert. How cool is that? I just think that's just the coolest thing ever. Look at all the work put into the sole. Just a nice smooth sole and lead weight in the back. So look at the curvature of this face. Can you see how it kind of like drops off like this? Just absolutely an amazing thing to look at. I love how this just curves. It just looks so natural. And when you hold it and look down at it, you're like, yes, this is my stick. It's super cool. We move up the whipping. My first thought when I looked at this is, oh, it must be shellacked because there's some discoloration here. I'm not so sure. It might just be wax. But this aging on this whipping is absolutely stunning. We move up the hickory shaft to a stamp of the previous owner, J.W. Peace, it looks like. Some whipping here, holding on this lambskin leather grip. You can actually see the butt end of the shaft right here. This is really a pleasure to look at, and I'm really grateful that I can be showing you this. I am going to do some things for us as a future audience looking back into history. This is a modern golf ball. I'm going to put this modern golf ball right here as a size reference, just to give you kind of wrap your head around the size of this club. I'm also going to show you a club from 100 years after this club. This club represents the 1890s. And I have a club right here that represents the 1990s, the end of the 1990s. TaylorMade came out with this Fire Soul Rescue Hybrid. Now, from my angle, it's not going to show up very well on camera. But from my angle, it looks like they have similar lofts if the R Forgan doesn't have more loft. The lie is obviously very different. But look at the shape of that tailor-made head. 100 years later, does that look familiar to anybody? Could you see where they might have gotten that shape from? It's funny, the more things change, the more they stay the same. This driver represents a transition for golf equipment. From this point on, all woods have adopted the Bulger ideas. The competition of the era really drove golfers to accept this innovation and R Forgan to manufacture it. I imagine it would be enormously difficult to leave the concave Hugh Philp design drivers behind and move to this new idea. We still use these ideas today. The story isn't over. If you want to know how it ended next time you go golfing, look at your driver. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at this amazing club and its history and the history of golf equipment. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe. If you want to support the channel, we do have a Patreon page. All patrons are welcome. Any little contribution, $1 a month, really helps this channel. I'd like to thank my patrons. In fact, I can't thank them enough. Thank you so much for your support and sticking with me through all these years. If you want to support the channel in another way, you can visit my Amazon shop. I am an Amazon associate. I make proceeds from qualifying purchases. Thank you for watching. I am the Vintage Golfer.